Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the City Chatter podcast here for the City of Grand Forks.
Twice as good.
Twice as good, yes. I'm John Bernstrom, Public Information Officer for the City of Grand Forks. Episode 2 guest is Councilmember Bret Weber, Ward 3. Bret, thank you for joining us.
Hello, John. Good afternoon.
Yeah, as we were talking on our beforehand here, we've been working together a long time.
It's over 10 years, over a decade.
And that was going to be my question. You've been on the council now. We're up to a decade now. Yeah.
I'm over 11 years and less than a year left at this point.
Less than a year
Yes,
left. Yes.
yes.
We'll leave that. You've I believe have made that known. Do you want to make that known?
The future is hard to predict. So, yes. I know I've got less than a year left on my current term.
On your current term.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go. So with when you were first on council, sorry, I sent you a list of things we're going to talk about, and this is not on the list.
That's great.
The first time you were on council, to now, how not so much different is it, but your perspective changed.
Well, I mean, we're just getting ready to start the budget process. And when a new member of council is elected, ironically, they get thrown right in the middle of one of our most important jobs,
Right.
The budget cycle. And your head is still spinning. You've got this fire hose of information coming at you, and you're dealing with this complicated budget. What's our city budget? Over $150 million? It's
In total, would you take in all the grants and enterprise fund? Yeah.
Basically, you are on the board of directors. One way of thinking of it is that you're on the board of directors of a relatively large company. And that budget process happens so fast. And before you know it, the budget process, that first one, was completed. And then you start figuring out how to be on council. Then, you know, the second one comes around, and it seems to go really fast as well. It takes a few of those cycles before you really start to feel like you've got your feet under you.
Sure.
And that's just one of the many jobs. So one thing that changes is you get to learn the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. I should.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Another thing that's certainly changed a great deal is the composition of the council. When I was first elected, Hal Gershman was council president.
And had been for a long time.
Had been for a while already. And he was part of that post-flood new city council that had come on. So there was kind of an established way of doing things. And it was mostly older white guys who were on the council. Since then, we've had women on council. We've had younger people. Katie Dockler, our first woman of color on the council. So those are some of the things that have changed.
Yeah. At what point as a council member do you go from I'm the new guy to everyone's looking at me for advice?
It took about 8 or 9 years.
As you're at the end now.
Well, it depended. You know, when I was first on council, we were still, instead of committee of the whole, we were still operating with finance and development and safety and service.
That's
those
right.
two subcommittees. And I think that I'd been on council maybe 2 years or so when there was a shift in leadership, and I became chair of that finance and development committee. So at that point, there were also new council members because we essentially have a new council every 2 years, reconstitute ourselves every 2 years.
Yeah.
So already from that first change, I was feeling a little more seasoned at the same time that I was still feeling like the new guy. So there was that kind of a liminal step there where was it dark or light? We were still working on it.
Yeah. So getting to some of the council work that's going on now, at the meeting on Monday, there was a discussion regarding murals and you know, how it came forward. But the reason it was murals at schools, but the reason it came before city council, and this was one of those where I even think it came up in discussion of what is the city involved in this? This is a school discussion. The city makes this law. So that was part of the reason why it came before you guys as city council was the sign code in the city is dictated by the city.
Correct, right.
So with that, moving forward, it's still a little muddy, isn't it? I mean, we'll put it this way: we don't know if any mural is going to go up yet.
No, we do not know if any mural is going to go up yet. And in fact, let me talk about that in some very broad terms.
Sure.
Both about murals, but also public art. When I first was elected to council, over the last 10, I'm going to switch gears for a second. Over the last 10 years, we have increasingly had interns working at City Hall.
Yeah, we have one here now.
And that's become a rich part of the working environment at City Hall. I think that I had a couple of the first interns.
I think you did.
And those two individuals, social work majors from the University of North Dakota, they took on lots of different jobs. We were doing a lot with New Americans at that time. But one of the things that stands out for me from their work, and I think it would be a part of their memory as well, was the Civil War Memorial, the Army of the Grand Republic.
Yes.
When I was elected to council, I'd only lived in Grand Forks, at that point, 2012. So I'd been here about 6 years. And I still recalled my first day in Grand Forks. I was living out on the south end. I'd gone for a bike ride downtown and rode through this great neighborhood. Amazing elm trees arching over Belmont and Reeves Drive, and got to that downtown, just on the outskirts of downtown.
Yeah.
Odin's service station was right there. I needed some air in my tires, so I got to stop in and meet Paul on my...
old school service station, right?
Yeah, my first day in Grand Forks. And I thought, wow, what a great neighborhood. The church bells were ringing.
St. Mary's.
And there was some odd statue that you couldn't hardly even see because it was so overgrown with bushes. So one of the first things that I enjoyed getting to be a part of, and that I had interns working on, was connecting the great relationship between the city and Park District. We have a great relationship with the other taxing entities. And cleaned up that park, new landscaping, put in lights, and had a great celebration that day with some 1920s music. Because it was when I was elected, it was the centennial of that monument going up.
Okay. It's been up 100 years.
Yeah.
I explained to people, I've had this conversation with their intern today. I go, do you realize Grand Forks has a Civil War memorial?
Yes.
And I lived here for how long before I realized what that was? I think it's amazing.
It's one of my favorite pieces of public art. And so that was displayed more favorably, made more accessible. And one of the next things we worked on was murals. As I have the pleasure of getting to travel around the country, I like back roads, going through small towns, and I enjoy getting to see the murals in those communities. It's a real sense of who the community is, their identity, unique to each community. Even heading out to Bemidji, I get to travel through the small towns between here, and Foston has some great murals, etc. Bagley, and so I was hoping that we could change that ordinance. We worked on it for a while, and there's another mural that many of us drive by on a regular basis, and I bet most of us don't see it anymore. There's a storage unit right there.
Yes, I remember that one too.
By the railroad track.
Yeah, right by the police station.
Yeah, and Professor Jonitz from UND put together that small mural. It's on a board so that it can be put up, taken down, moved, whatever. There were concerns then about maintenance. That's now 10 years old. And still not needing any maintenance. The rest of the building, we got it painted at that time because they cleaned it up to celebrate this new mural. It could use a new paint job, but the mural is still in great shape. By the way, as you drive by and look at that, it's kind of a comic strip caption of the life and times of Fatty Arbuckle, an early silent film star.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's those stories are always,
He traveled through Grand Forks on a train, and John Yitz knew this, and so that was the theme of his mural.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So we'll see what happens going forward with school district and stuff, some ordinance stuff. Who knows? Who
Right.
knows? It's a school that's going to be torn down and built, and there's lots of what ifs in this scenario.
There was a vote last night. We'll see what that vote means. As
Yep.
you said, we don't have a mural yet. Certainly, I am and have been for a long time in favor of more murals in our community, especially when the community comes forward and says, we would like this in our neighborhood. So we'll see how that plays out.
I think this mural story is kind of a caveat of in the time I've worked for the city. I'm coming up 17 years now. I'm chasing you. You'll get neighborhoods, and I mean neighborhoods, the near north end, rallied around something, got some things done in the neighborhood. The near south end did a good job as well. This university neighborhood has, I'll use the term, organized. And they are now coming forward with ideas that get in front of the city council. I will say this as a Grand Forks resident, that I take great pride in that. Hey, a neighborhood got together.
Yes.
Right? They as opposed to sitting and complaining about something, they went and did something. I think it's great.
So I took over council representation of Ward 3 from Elliot Glassheim, who'd been there over 30 years.
See, the city was founded and then Elliott. You're right, yeah.
He was already all grown up
Exactly,
when it happened. And he'd been a real force behind the establishment development of the Near North Side Neighborhood Association. And they did some great work with the front porch project. They
Got
put
some
together
grants for sidewalks and stuff.
sidewalks, a historical walking tour of that neighborhood, did some really great jobs. And when I first got on council, that was a very vibrant neighborhood association. And I continued to meet with them for years. We tried to develop a similar thing with the Near South Side and the Civil War Memorial, the Grand Army of the Republic. That became an impetus for that neighborhood to come together. And it continued with an emphasis, not so much on public art, but on traffic calming. And
they're still working on. You're still doing that.
We've had some experiments that I think have been successful. The neighborhood thinks have been successful, and we continue to do that work. But these things do have a kind of a shelf life. You have folks who are willing to invest a lot of their time and energy, and they get tired. It's all unpaid work.
Right. It's volunteer pretty much.
And it's a lot of work
Yeah.
to be involved in those. So it's understandable that they kind of come and go. But and they still exist, the Near North Side, the Near South Side. But the real up-and-comer right now is the University Park Neighborhood Association. They had a great event at University Park this
on
weekend.
Saturday. Yeah.
Some great live music. I wish I could tell you the band because I really enjoyed them, but I've not remembered the name of the band. Food truck and stuff for the kids and a great time. I enjoyed attending I was there for an hour.
Sure.
Had agreed to come by. Representative Osowski was there before me. Part of the event was an opportunity to invite out council members so that people could speak with their representatives. As you know, though, John, sometimes we hold these things.
Yeah.
And once in a while, the Near North Side in its day, we would have big turnout. Near South Side, I've been to some of those meetings where we've had 30 or 40 people show up. Other times we show up and it's crickets or a couple of folks who we sit around and chat with.
Well, and I'll say this as as I'm using air quotes for the city, right?
Yeah.
Of the city needs to do more meetings like this, and I go, sure, no problem. About 1 in 5, maybe, or that I would consider a good meeting, productive. Not just people yelling at you, like people trying to work together to get something done, or bringing forward an issue that is just like, what can we do to work through this? And like you said, and I've been to some where nobody showed up. So it's
Had a few of those.
Yeah, and it's tough sometimes.
And the city wants to do that outreach. We want feedback from the citizens, and we'll hold series of those.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a city council meeting after having several of these, and people will say, well, why weren't we given an opportunity to give input? And of course, we have a public meeting every Monday, every other Monday, an opportunity for the public to speak at those meetings. But everyone's busy. They've got a lot going on.
And I tell people that sometimes when people will call me and just be like, complaining about something, whatever it is, right? I'll be like, well, have you come to a meeting? I realize this stuff. You can watch it afterwards. Like, there's ways to be engaged without physically sitting there, and lots of times it'd be like, well, you know what? I'm going to try that and see what I can find. It like, see the discussion, see all right, what you guys as council members are really wrestling with, and if it were a tough topic, right? What are you guys really wrestling with, as opposed to just, well, they just do what they want? No, they don't. There's lots of discussion that goes on. It doesn't work that way. No. And I think that's one thing. Going on to another topic is a change in the council meetings of how some of that public input is taken. As a communicator, I don't think there's anything wrong with at least taking a look and trying something. Like, you didn't change a law; it's a policy, right? And see how this works. And what we changed was public comment either on a specific agenda item, or you're speaking at the end of the meeting, right? And I'm not sure which council member it was that said that, but it's along the lines of, what's the harm in trying? See how it goes. We've had one meeting. How do you think it went?
It seemed to go very well last night. I thought it was a good meeting. And I'm going to preface my direct response to that with a couple other observations. One, we were kind of complaining that people don't show up to meetings or participate.
Sure.
And yet, I'm constantly struck by the amazing number of people who tell me Monday night must-view TV is city council. And,
right. For the past
all
2 years.
Age groups, we have people who tune in and watch city council meetings. And the other thing that was a word that was used was complaints. We often think people contact us to complain about things. Actually, the vast majority of feedback that I get, whether it's walking my dog down on the Greenway or at the grocery store, just wandering around downtown, I have people come up to me, and rather than complaints, we have people thanking us for our service. So that's actually the more common experience. But we certainly do provide an opportunity for people to give feedback, for people to complain, for people to let us know when they are unhappy, and that's all an important part of good governance, especially at the local level. One of the great things about being on city council is that, from my perspective, it is the kind of the purest form of representative democracy.
Oh, yeah.
An elected official might go to D.C. and serve in Congress. They are away from home. They have staff to buffer them from their constituency.
Even at a state level, right?
Even at the state level.
They're in Bismarck. Some of them have staff. Right?
I remember Max Schneider was a Senate minority leader.
Yes, he was.
At the same time when his wife, Crystal Schneider...
when she was on council.
When she was on council. And a lot of people wouldn't think of this, but Senate minority leader or council member, she received far more constituent contact, calls, letters than Mac did.
Right, and he was a Senate minority leader.
Yes, and that contact also happens, as I mentioned, at the grocery store. Mac was buying his groceries for a few months every other year down in Bismarck. I'm buying my groceries right here in town. The people who voted for me or against me, we're buying groceries at the same time. So,
well, buying groceries at the same time, live next to you, right?
Right.
We are both in a unique spot. We do quite a bit of work with the state legislature. You've been the chair of the Grand Forks Legislative Committee. I've been a liaison with that for how many sessions now?
You were doing that before I came on, right?
I did it one session before you joined as chair.
I thought you'd been doing it forever.
Well, it feels like at the end of a session, it feels like forever. It does.
They last a while.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. But we have the benefit of getting to know our state legislators, and even at a state level, I think, and this is not a criticism, this is an observation. Like, we'll read bills sometimes, and we're like, all right, whose name's on it, and what's the backstory, as opposed to, oh, what are we trying to do here? Like, every once in a while, we'll see bills, and we're like, well, that one's weird.
And it turns out that somebody had something happen in their alleyway, and they create a bill to address that personal problem. We have seen that, haven't we, John?
It's unfortunate that there was one several sessions ago, and it would have made, if somebody was doing work on flood, it was something happened in Minot. They were building a dike. I think the excavator clipped a garage. That garage happened to be owned by a lawyer who knew a state senator. I mean,
Yes.
it was one of those things where at the end of the session we pieced it all together. But they were going to make it the state liable for all damage caused for like flood protection, which sure sounds good until you really look at it. You're talking eminent domain. You're trying to save property and infrastructure, and you're like, well, we just spent 2 weeks discussing this bill. Right? That was the time. I remember it was Howard Swanson at the time was city attorney, and he's like, this is terrible. He was, this is terrible. If we were to, heaven forbid, have to build a dike, we are no longer trying to save property. We're just going down property we own.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes it tough sometimes.
The city's been, you mentioned Mr. Swanson, the city's been really well served by our city attorneys. We had
Oh, yeah.
Howard Swanson for so many years, decades, who was respected across the state as a municipal lawyer. And then more recently, Mr. Gaustad, the last couple of years, doing a fantastic job, wonderful again in our legislative efforts. And also, like Mr. Swanson before him, the State League of Cities often was looking to our
Yeah.
city attorney for opinions and support on different things.
No, that's a good point. Both of them, right? I
Yes.
remember Mr. Swanson would be gone sometimes. We're like, where is he? Well, Minot's working through flood litigation, where to put flood walls and stuff like that, home buyouts, and he's the expert in North Dakota, right? So they get a hold of him. I was not aware of Mr. Gaustad's connection to the legislature until he came on, of how at a state level, how they're like, we need to talk to Dan about this. And I hope people understand that how much that benefits the city.
Yes, yeah.
I want to. We've touched on some city things, some legislative things. Let's learn a bit about Bret. Again, I've had car rides with you to Bismarck, and I'm like, I had no idea about this. About you. You're kind of on your second career, aren't you?
At least my second.
At least your second.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, you're a professor at UND.
Right? A social work professor. I'm
social
chair
work
of the department right now.
Yep, that's what you do currently. That wasn't not a high school job for you, was it? Can you talk about your journey to Grand Forks? And we've gotten until the end of the day. I've heard the story, and it's quite amazing. But can you talk about that a little bit?
I knew my PhD is actually in history. I did enjoy teaching U.S. history for a while, but I was increasingly teaching the history of social work. So I've ended up with as a social work professor. But that was not where I started, no. However, I had long known that this was a place that I wanted to end up. So I graduated high school at a very young age and moved from Hamilton, Ontario, where I'd grown up, back to Greeley, Colorado. Greeley, Colorado, very much like Grand Forks, about the same population size,
College
sugar
town.
beet town, college town. And in Greeley, I attended as a freshman at the University of Northern Colorado, where I did some permanent damage and to my GPA, and had some real fun for a couple of quarters.
Sure.
I was trying to put myself through school, and quickly ran out of money. Got a job in a pizza shop. Really had a great time because at that time it was not only $1.75 an hour, but all the pizza I could eat.
Your meals were covered.
Yeah, so I had to drop out of school, was working in a pizza joint. I was working for a small company that was bought out by this slightly larger company, an outfit called Domino's.
Oh, yeah.
They had like well over 100 stores at that time.
At that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were growing very rapidly. I was managing for them, and wanted to get in on a piece of this. My thinking was, I'll open up 20 or 30 pizza stores, sell them. I'll go back to school as a millionaire and get to be a professor that way.
Kind of worked that way.
Except for the millionaire part. But I did get it. So I was working for Domino's, found some investors, and said, "Here, we should start a Domino's. They're up in they're
Right.
really go
They
places."
send pizza to your house.
Yeah, and they said, "Domino's? Who's ever heard of Domino's?" So,
Yeah.
so we started on our own. Started a chain. A week after I opened, a Domino's opened across the street, but I knew their game, so we competed quite well. And within a few years, I had a small chain of pizza delivery shops, and branched out into some other restaurants, and had some really good years, John.
Sure.
And then
Yeah,
being a small businessman, it's
there's good
a
and
tough
bad.
time. There's good and bad.
Yeah.
And I realized, ooh, this whole thing could go down the tubes, and I don't have a degree. What if I need to get a job? I
Heaven
could deliver
forbid.
pizzas
Right.
somewhere, but maybe I could do that, but something else as well. And so I went back to school and took my first business class. That was helpful, and it helped me to turn around the business. I also took a library science class, which helped me do research on my business and the business management. And also I took a study skills class to learn how to be a student.
To learn how to be a student.
So those were 3 really useful classes.
And this was
for me.
still in Greeley?
This was still in Greeley.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you took a class to learn how to go to
No,
class.
no. This was in Utah. I had
In Utah.
moved out
You were at
to
Utah at this point.
In
Yeah.
fact, at this point, I had moved out to Layton, Utah, near Hill Air Force Base.
Okay.
Again, kind of similar to a situation here, except they had no pizza delivery business. So I opened the first delivery shop to Hill Air Force Base. But a few years later, I was going at Weber State,
Yeah.
or as we call it in my family, Weber State
Weber State,
University.
spelled just like your name.
And I took those classes, was able to turn the business around and keep things going, but also got the bug for being a student. Ended up getting a bachelor's in history and then eventually a PhD in history. So my wife and I were pursuing these new careers. I sold the business at that time to the employees who kept it going for another 10 years.
Sure. Good for them.
We finished our degrees and went out on the job market. We had interviews in the Redwoods in Northern California, an interview in Southern Colorado near New Mexico, a favorite place of ours, or a place called Grand Forks, North Dakota.
That's right. So you picked the weird one.
Well, we had a friend who had moved out
Sure.
here a couple of years, so mainly we took the interview just to come
go visit a buddy.
friend. And it was the first of the 3 interviews. By the end of our first day here, we were wondering if we even needed to go to the other 2 interviews because we'd fallen in love with the place. They'd shown us the Greenway, the people, and that August we were moved out here. August 8th, 2005, we moved here.
Yeah, it's not a similar story, but my wife and I, yes, I was going to live in Grand Forks for 4 years to go to college.
Yes.
That was 26 years ago.
Yes.
Right? I met my wife, and we're like, we can go wherever.
Right?
But why do we want to leave? Right? We need a reason, and now our kids are just like, hey, what else have you done? We're like, we love it here. Yeah. This is home. This has turned into home, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing how stuff like that can happen.
It's been a great community for us. So much opportunity here. Wonderful place to make a home. Our children were graduated high school, moved out here, followed us out here, had grandkids here. They've moved just in the last year back to the Salt Lake City area, but Grand Forks has been great for us.
Sure. No, that's great. I've heard that story before, and I didn't know it. And I'm like, wow, that's quite a story to make your way around. And now on city council for almost a dozen years. Yeah, that's good. So back to city council a little bit. One last you talked about the dynamics of the other council members, right? Every 2 years, there's potentially new people on the council and stuff. I will say this as a city employee, that every 2 years, it's not so much of, ooh, who got elected, is this good or bad? It's, all right, I gotta learn new people. I have to, who's gonna be comfortable enough to ask me questions so we can help them out. As a council member, I mean, there's 400 some employees that you potentially need to reach out to at some point. How has that gone as a council member of just like, okay, I know I can reach out to this person, or I know they can at least get me pointed in the right direction, because every government works different too, even if you were involved somewhere else. How does that, I know how it goes from an employee standpoint. How does that go from a council member standpoint?
One of the things that I did when I was first running for council, certainly I spoke with Elliot a lot, but I started meeting with department leaders. Rick Duquette was the city administrator at that time.
Yep.
And one of the really important lessons for me over the last 11 years has been to value city staff, or as Mr. Phelan and I recognize, bureaucrats. I kind of grew up complaining, bureaucrats, they clog up the system, cause all this trouble. And I had done some work with the state legislature in Utah, and I'd already begun an appreciation for bureaucrats, and that has been reinforced by my work with the city council. Here's who bureaucrats are. Bureaucrats, city staff in this case, are the folks who keep everything running. They keep the wheels on the bus.
Sure.
And on top of that, they put up with the elected officials who get to be on TV on Monday night and who go into the grocery store and people either thank me or complain to me.
I was going to say, you get both ends of that.
Right.
Yep.
But the reality is that it's city staff. This is something that happened just last night at council. Ms. Amundsen came in to thank us for the fantastic job of cleaning up the coulee over by Sertoma Park. A couple months ago, she'd started sending us pictures, and it was in pretty rough shape after the winter. And so she wanted to thank City Council. And Mr. Phelan, and I tried to echo this, said, "Oh, that was nice of you to thank council members. We didn't do it. City staff did it." And she was thinking, city council members we told city staff, go clean this up, and they went and cleaned it up. No, city staff were already on that as soon as the weather made it possible. And that's just one small example of it's one of the things folks don't realize that makes life so great here in Grand Forks is we have fantastic city staff. I don't know that that's always been the case. I've heard stories about some of the dynamics prior to the flood and even in the period right after the flood, but we have been tremendously fortunate with great city staff over the last 10 plus years. I mentioned Rick Duquette a moment ago. One of the things that Duquette told me when I was running for office is, we're in trouble here in Grand Forks because we have so much institutional knowledge, and a lot of these folks are going to be retiring.
Yep.
What will we do? And what we have done is hire a new generation, young, fantastic leaders. And at this point, I've already mentioned his name a couple times, but let me reemphasize. City Administrator Todd Phelan.
Oh, yeah.
This is a guy who was head of Public Works.
That's when I first met him.
When I first got on council, and then City Administrator after Mr. Duquette retired. Todd, part of a national search. We had some impressive candidates. I was on that hiring committee that did the interviewing. There were a number of us, so it's not that I made the decision. But Todd very quickly emerged as the obvious candidate. And even then, I was a little concerned. Okay, to go from Public Works to running the whole city, how's he going to do? He's done an amazing job. And part of his amazing work is that, like an elected official, he takes a lot of heat when people aren't happy with things.
He absorbs a lot.
He doesn't always get the credit. We often get credit that we don't deserve. We sometimes get heat that we don't deserve. My experience is Todd gets a lot of heat he doesn't deserve, but he doesn't get the same level of credit that he deserves.
I was at a ward meeting, and somebody was busting on Todd.
Yeah.
And referenced his salary. You know, all of our salaries are public knowledge, right? And I knew this person, and I go, he's the best deal the city has. I mean, what he could make in another community, is private sector would blow it away. And I'll put it this way: you can't outwork Todd. I've tried. I'm like, I'm going to get to work early. I'm going to be Todd. And you walk in and he opens the door for you. And you're like, stinking Todd.
You go to the gym first thing in the morning and he's already showered and on his way out.
Exactly. Yeah. Stuff like that. No. Brett, thank you very much. This was great.
Wow, that was an hour?
Well, it wasn't quite an hour, but they don't have to go an hour.
Good.
Right? They don't have to go, and I'm out of topics.
Okay, that's a good closing time. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Brett.
Nice working with you these years.
Bret Weber, Grand Forks City Council member, Ward 3. From the City Chatter podcast, this was episode 2. You can go to the city website, grandforksgov.com/podcast, and you can see episode 1 and episode 2. And you can also give your feedback on how you think these things are going. But for Bret Weber, I'm John Bernstrom. Thanks for joining us for episode 2. Bye, everybody.